Good morning.
You started already.
Oh, yeah. We're in like Flynn, baby. Welcome to If These Heels Could Talk. I'm JoyGenea with Solutions by JoyGenea.
And I'm Michelle with Bad Cat Digital. And we are talking today about the benefits of experience versus the benefits of the fresh perspective or new ideas.
Okay, pause that for a second. I want to give a PSA first.
Oh, okay.
I have a very valuable female to female PSA.
Okay.
Went in for my driver's license renewal yesterday.
Okay.
Took zero time to fix hair, do anything. No makeup, no eyelashes, eyebrows, the works. A year ago, I had to get the new license because remember they were requiring the brand.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this thing's only a year old. There's no difference between those photos and last year I spent an hour getting ready. I'm going to look good for my driver's license photo this year. I'm going to do it all, curled the hair, did the makeup, all the nine. Wore a nice outfit. Yesterday, I was in the world's worst flannel shirt and t-shirt.
And your new driver's license photo.
Identical because, just so you know, they pretty much cut you off mid-neck now.
Yeah.
And most of my hair was gone. So that's my PSA. Do not work so hard at
Don't bother.
Just show up and
there's a group of us who kind of live like that.
I know. But some of us thought our driver's license photo should look a little nice. I thought it mattered. I just want to express to those of us, let it go.
All right. Male, female, or anything in between.
Trying to get just all jazzed up.
Let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go.
See, that's a moment of, experience and innovation.
So this is where this came from.
Yes.
I was at in our town in central Minnesota. We have a new city hall, and I was at this new city hall, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And the mayor that we have, it's really beautiful. It's in the old high school. Our mayor has been mayor for about 19 years, and I enjoy his company. I mean, I know that there's opinions about, is he a good mayor? Is he not a good mayor? That's not what we're here to talk about. That's not the point of the conversation.
Don't get all sidetracked.
We don't want to get all sidetracked with that. It just happened to be the thing that brought this up was political, not the conversation is political. So I'm standing in this new area where they hold the city council meetings, and there's a picture wall that has award winners from the last 15, 20 years for some things. And it has all of these things, but it also has all of the mayors of the history of our town, which go back, 100 and some odd years. Yeah. Probably about 160 years, 170 years.
Oh, nice.
And there are 40 pictures. I didn't count them, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
Only 4 are in color.
That is so interesting.
So it's 2022, and color photography is well over 100 years old. Of course, we know this. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those millennials who's oh my gosh, color photography. When was that? 1986? No, I know that color photography was widely commercially available in Kodak in the mid-late 60s. Mm-hmm. But here's my thing: the mid-late 60s, that's 60 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 65.
Yeah.
So does that truly mean that our town has had 4 individuals? Of course, they're all white guys. Every single one of the people in the pictures was white guy, but 4 people.
Yeah.
In over 60 years.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between 60 and 70 years, and that seems telling to me. And I'm not judging it. I'm not giving it a moral good or bad. I'm saying that I think it says something about the character of our community. I think it says something about our community really valuing experience, really valuing stability, really valuing safety, really valuing comfort, and really valuing, this is the entity that is known to me. This is the entity that I understand. Therefore, I will vote for this entity, whether I agree with them or not, because I understand them. Now, it's not that in 70 years, all of those mayors ran uncontested, because they didn't. I looked it up. It's that in those 70 years, people voted for there's that saying, the devil I know versus the devil I don't.
Yes.
People voted for the devil they know, whether, it's kind of like people whose cars break down all the time, but they break down in the same way. So they keep fixing the same problems in their car because they know what's going to happen
Yep.
versus getting a new car and having different problems.
Right. A new used car, so you buy somebody else's drama.
You buy somebody else's problems and
Yeah.
then you don't know what they're going to be, so you can't plan for them. So this becomes our conversation today. And I know that was a really long lead in, but this becomes our conversation today. And I'm not trying, like, it's hard to frame the conversation because it seems like the words are very judgy, or weighted in one direction or another. But I think about
are due to our age a little bit. Like, let's be realistic.
I think about security, and I think about safety, I think about stability, and I think about experience.
Mhm.
And then I think about fresh new ideas and excitement and innovation and, wanting to shake it up and change things and wanting to do that for the better.
Mhm.
And other people going, no, I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good
I
with
know
where things are.
This is comfortable.
I just had a thought, but what were you going to say?
Oh, go for it. What do you got?
Well, I think maybe it speaks to the privilege of our community.
Oh, that's an interesting. We'll put that in the pot and stir it around.
Because why would you change things if you're fairly comfortable as it is?
Correct.
Because the risks of change then outweigh the benefits of change if, you don't have really anything that if all you really care, if the biggest problem in your life that city government can get involved in is potholes, does it really matter who the mayor is?
Nope.
But the problem is, if the biggest problem in your life is that you are unhoused because there is no affordable rental housing in your community, does it matter who the mayor is? Yes.
Probably. I was just going to say, yeah.
So maybe it speaks to the privilege.
I think that's part of it. Like all equations, there's never one factor.
Right. Well, that's true.
So I think it's important. I think it's good that you bring that in there because that has to be placed in there because those typically, on average, those are the people making the choices and decisions for the whole.
Right.
And that's kind of how that's been. It's interesting. So you texted the topic, like you tossed that out there, and I've been listening to a variety of books and podcasts and so forth, and so many thoughts came to mind. But one that was really interesting was, to me, I think it gets down to trust, and I bring it into business. We talked about it a little bit before, but trust and branding.
Yeah.
It's a really good story. I think it's a really good reminder about your branding and about the trust that you have with people.
Yeah.
He brought up a great question because this guy's talking about branding and so forth. It's called Alchemy is the book. Anyways, and it was written just recently because he talks about things that happened in the last couple of years.
Sure.
Anyways, but he talks about the fact when you needed to buy your first car, on average, where do most people go? They go back home.
Yeah.
And they go to the dealer
that their parents went to.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's that he said that's the easiest way to help people zoom down to the fact that we go to where we trust. And we do that because we don't want to buy the lemon.
We go to where we're comfortable.
Right.
When the stakes are high.
Yes.
We go to what we know.
Yes. And I'm like, that is really interesting. He goes, you can't deny, like most people, that's what you do. And he goes, it's not logical. It's all about trust. And
it's emotional. But it also, I think it also takes advantage of the kind of worn paths in your brain because when you're making a big decision like that, especially your first car, and it's a big financial decision, you want the help, you want all of those things.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of energy to change your neural pathways. It takes a lot of energy to decide to be different, to decide to do something different, to look at a problem and say, I'm going to approach this problem in a completely different way than I did yesterday.
Which means I always think of it like the Dungeons and Dragons types of die.
Yeah.
With all the sides.
Yeah.
Whereas knowing something, right? Knowing something, having its experience, that feels like a 6-sided dice. Like I can roll that. I've got all 6 sides covered.
Right.
I know 4 out of 6.
Yeah. I know the odds. I understand how the dice works.
But
I understand.
It's like
you throw a D20. It's like, what's going to happen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you need when you're going to make a new decision.
Yeah.
Like buying the car. I'll just use that example. There's a lot of variables. There are 20 different sides to that thing.
Yeah.
And if you can remove a whole bunch of sides to that, you do.
Well, and that's exactly, I love the metaphor because that's what I was going to say. What I was going to say is, it takes so much energy to be consciously different or to consciously change something that if you don't have to use that energy, why would you?
Or if you don't have it available.
Right, because you're putting it into something, you're putting it into the anxiety over a brand new car, which is something you've never done before.
Oh, I was just thinking
or even a used car.
I was just thinking if you're a parent, maybe
Right.
sandwiched between a generation, so maybe helping to take care of your parents, and then you've got a job. Right about there, I'd be like, who do I know?
Yeah. What's going on?
Here's what I'm looking for in a vehicle. Call me when you find
Yeah.
it. Because
the interesting thing about the metaphor is that there are 20-sided dice in Dungeons and Dragons. A D20 is a thing, but so is a D3.
Oh.
So, when you don't know what you're giving up, you could be giving up something easier. You could be giving up something. If you're not willing to put in the effort, you could be saying, I'm still going to do things this way, even though I don't really understand why, because I don't have the energy to question myself. And then you could be doing things in a harder way, like the chicken in the sink or the turkey in the sink with the dishwasher or the dish rack over it. Do you know that?
No.
Do you know that little?
No. Give me that metaphor.
Yeah. So, person making Thanksgiving dinner
Got it.
puts the turkey in a sink and then takes the dish drying rack and flips it upside down and puts it on the turkey in the sink, because that's what his or her mother always did.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And then the next day, his or her mother comes over and is like, hey, why do you have the dish rack in the sink with the turkey? And the person making the dinner is like, well, that's how you always did it. And she's like, yeah, but you don't have a cat.
Oh, funny.
So mom did it that way for a reason. That reason may not apply to you. Just because you know that that's how it was done, if you don't understand the reason, maybe you don't need to go that far. Maybe you don't need to do it. Maybe it's an unnecessary step. Maybe driving, maybe if you live in California, going back home to Georgia to buy your first car is actually a giant pain in the butt.
Yeah. Nope, that might be a lot too much.
Maybe you didn't know that you're going to have to pay sales tax on that car separately. So when you go to, register your tabs in California, you don't have enough money to pay for the tabs. That's what happened to me when I bought my first car.
Out in California, you got emissions control, and Georgia, they probably didn't. And then they didn't have that,
and it's a whole thing. So as we're thinking about this and framing this conversation, I don't know that one is inherently better or worse than the other. And I really am not trying to use judgment language when I talk about it. I find new things exciting. I find new ideas exciting. And so when I talk about experience and stability versus new ideas and innovation, I tend to use language that's weighted in that direction, because I think that change is really exciting. But not everybody thinks that. A lot of people find it very threatening.
Change in different levels, though. That's how I would put it. Everybody has a comfort level. That's what's important, I think, to understand in business, is where are you comfortable in change and reaching and leaning in to understand that, because sometimes you might drag your team too far.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I after 6 years of running a business, 2 of them through a global pandemic, my risk tolerance is super high.
Right.
Super high, because what do I have to lose?
Yeah.
And so I did that this year. I pushed the team too far. I went too far too fast and had to rein it back in, and it was painful.
Yeah. And that's because you're an innovator and you're out on the edge, and you're looking at, and they were not there with you. But the same can also, now we can go to the other side,
right,
and talk about stagnation. There are other areas within your business that you're completely afraid to move. You're like, hey, this works. Like, this works.
Like, don't rock the boat.
Right. I still have a land. I don't, but I've heard this from people. Our project management
software is a good example of that.
I was going to say landlines.
Yeah.
Are good. I still have a few friends and so forth that are like, oh, I'm never letting go of my landline. So dead. Nobody's calling that.
Well, we have a landline for the business.
But it's not even a landline. It's a VoIP line.
But yeah, totally.
No, I mean landline.
Oh,
I'm talking hardwired in, paying. No, you didn't go back far enough, honey.
Do people still pay for that?
Yes.
That makes no sense at all.
Well, when I lived with my grandmother when I was 19, 20, in between college years, my parents would ship me off to grandma's because they didn't want me back. And because I was a teenager. They didn't want, like, come on, teenager in college, who wants that back? Mm-mm. Anyhow, so they'd ship me off to grandma's, and grandma was awesome, but she was still paying rent on a dial phone. Oh. And I couldn't grasp that. This was 1990 something. And I'm like, no, how much do you pay a month for this? She's like, I've been paying $3.50 a month for 40. I'm like, you own this phone on so many levels. So many levels. I'm like, they're not coming for this phone. I'm like, no way. But again, comfortable. It was right there. That had been the phone in that house. I learned the pain of a
$3.50 a month for a rotary phone. In what this would have been
1990.
I was going to say 95.
91, 92-ish. It's like,
wow.
Yeah. But again, comfort. That's where,
I went to buy, I really wanted for a video that we were staging. I really wanted a rotary phone, and I went to Amazon to buy a rotary phone.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find one.
No.
Like I ended up going to Goodwill and they still didn't have any.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought one that looks like a rotary phone, but has buttons on it.
If anybody's actually used a rotary phone, the pain, like when you dial the wrong number,
I actually really, I don't know. I really like rotary phones. I like the tactile, anyway, there's a great movie from the 90s with Kevin Kline called In and Out.
Yeah. I remember that.
And there's a scene where a model is in a urban model is in a motel in the sticks, and the motel still has a rotary phone, and she goes to call her agent because her boyfriend left her in this motel, and she's like so put upon that she's in this horrid rural hotel and she can't use the phone. She starts to push at the rotary dial going, what is going on?
But again, it's perfect experience.
Yeah.
New thing. Here's another example from the book that I think falls in there. And I believe it all gets down to a lot of it is trust.
Yeah.
And his comment was, if you say hoverboard, what do you think of?
Back to the Future.
They sold hoverboards for a while.
Yeah.
But they weren't. Years ago. Would you know what they looked like? Because it was about 5 things came out with the name hoverboard around the same time. 5.
I think one of them was round. I think I saw a YouTube video of a round one.
Right.
But I think about the thing that looks like a skateboard in Back to the Future.
That's what I think of too. But they had these things. And what he pointed out was the fact that no large brand took them on. So all of these little companies came out with these things that they called hoverboards. So the word hoverboard got used for a variety of things. If you Google it, you get a bunch of things.
Right.
So he's like, right there's what it tells us about trust and brand, how that is important. Then after people got a bunch of them, a bunch had batteries and stuff. Anyhow, the batteries started exploding.
Yes, I do remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
But what brand? What lot number? What company?
Yeah.
Because it was never assigned a company and never assigned a brand.
So all 5 of them died because 2 of them were bad.
Right. Because we could not differentiate
between them.
Right. Because so it was
as consumers, we couldn't differentiate between them.
So experience over new innovation. Here was this new innovation and people were leaning in, but they couldn't even, because no brand, he said all it would have taken right at the cusp of that was a brand. If one brand had grabbed it, notable, trusting brand, and made a trusted,
like Hasbro,
right?
A toy brand,
right?
Right.
A trusted, notable. He goes, that would have been it. Like they would have owned the market. They would have nailed down what hoverboard means.
Right. They would have defined it forever.
And he goes, we don't recognize how much companies have to talk to us.
Yeah.
Like how much. And so I was thinking about that in this experience over new thing conversation. Here was this new thing.
Right.
But it couldn't even take off.
It's really interesting
because it was so confusing for it to launch.
It's really interesting because when we talk to, like, when I talk to people about brand names, my mom and I are starting another business and we were just talking about naming it. Mm-hmm. And when we were picking a name, I kept Googling the names that we were picking. And I kept dismissing things for reasons that my dad thought was stupid. Like, I would be like, no, there's a movie with that name from like the mid 80s, or no, there's a song called that, or a band called that from 1963. Yeah. And he was like, this is ridiculous. You're not doing anything with music. You're not doing why, like, it's not like you can't get a trademark. I'm like, it's not about a trademark. Mm-hmm. It's about being able to own our search results. Mm-hmm. Because if we start this and we put money into this, even if we just put, a few $1,000s into creating a logo and a brand and all of those things, mm-hmm. I want to be able to trademark it, but that's not my problem. My problem is that when people Google a name, if it's similar to a basketball team or a song or a movie or something in popular culture, we will never rank for our own name.
It'll take you forever and it'll cost a ton. And it's a poor choice.
It's a poor choice. So why not pick something that doesn't have those associations and therefore is easier for us to rank for when people search the name? And he's like, well, why would that bother? I said, because we're going to spend time, money, and energy getting people in our audience to understand what our business's name is.
Yes.
What our brand is.
Yes.
And if we do that, and then we're up against a horror movie from 1973 on Google, then that, first of all, it's not a reflection of us because it's the wrong genre, the wrong people, the wrong all of that. But Google doesn't know that. Google's a robot. It's a machine. It doesn't understand. And it has no skin in the game. Like, it doesn't care about us.
Right.
So we might as well pick something that can exist outside of that. And define something, and something that we can define for ourselves. And this is why brands make up words.
Yes.
Because Uber doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It didn't mean anything before the app. Etsy didn't mean anything before the website. Amazon was a forest and a river before it was a brand.
Google wasn't anything.
Google doesn't mean anything. The word doesn't mean anything.
Trust me, as a person who was alive prior to Google, when people started talking about it, I'm like, what?
You sound like you're talking to a baby.
Right.
When Google came out, people thought it was like goo goo gaga. Like that was always the joke. It was like you're talking to a small child. And why would anybody name their company something so silly and ridiculous?
Yes.
Right? And
well,
but you're defining a word, you're inventing a word and defining it.
Well, Amazon changed names. It originally started out as, what was it? Because
it was something else.
Something.
Something, because it was originally a book warehouse and
Yeah.
But that's the point. Like you have when you're naming something in naming convention, you have the option to pick something that means something kind of related to what you're doing, like Audible and their and listening to books audibly. Or you have the option to just make up something.
Yep.
I mean, Uber did have but in German.
Yes.
Uber,
it's a German word.
It's a German word, but it's not anymore.
No.
And it's kind of
word.
It's kind of like and propaganda does this with symbols as well. So branding and propaganda are pretty closely related.
They're friendly.
Yeah.
Let's just get honest. They're friendly.
And
they hang out at the bar.
So the same thing happens with colors. I'm willing to bet that most consumers could pick Target red out of a bank of reds.
Yeah.
Like if you were given 5 reds, you could probably pick Target's red out of those colors.
I would definitely say in our community that would be.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, there's a lot of Targets. there's a lot of Targets.
There's a lot of Targets.
In this conversation, I think it's coming clear to me that we all have different thresholds.
Right.
It's about trust.
And comfort.
Yeah. And it's about what the thing is that we're taking hands. So
then how do you impact your own threshold? Because in your own business, if you're thinking about experience versus the new idea, right? It can be really easy to, after 5 or 10 or 15 years, to say, we tried that. It didn't work. We tried that. It didn't work. And dismiss something that actually has some merit to either try again with new people.
Okay, I run into that. Because
all the time.
I run into it all the time. And in technology, that might have been true in the 19-somethings. I'll just be clear.
The 1900s?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make you feel old?
Yes. But back there, technology was not where it was at. That's the reality of it. Stuff moves so fast right now. So beliefs, rules that I made up when I was first in technology do not apply. Almost all of them I've had to wipe out. I've had to run up against.
Like what?
Which file format to save my music in? That was a huge battle at the beginning. And I had to undo that. it's fascinating, but almost every time I've gotten a new assistant or somebody else that's helped with my business, they'll start to do something like, ooh, we can't do it that way because here's what's happened in the past. And what I've learned through that and having to say it out loud is I'm like, wait, how far past is that?
Right.
And if it's more than like 3 years past, then we fact check it pretty much. We're like, is that a real thing?
Is that a real
it's
thing?
not a real thing. Like file naming. There's a simple one. You used to not be able to put any form of anything in there. You could not put
no characters.
No characters. Not, I mean, you'd break it.
Yeah.
It was not going to save. You weren't going to be able to pull it back up. That file's gone.
And our file naming convention now includes underscores.
That's just it.
Like we use them every day.
Right. But that was not, so it took me, that came along and I'm like, it's going to crash the system. And I'm like, no, it didn't crash the system. Mm-hmm. We're fine. Mm-hmm. But so I think, yes, I'm constantly being pushed by that just because of my age, which is good though. And you have to question it though.
I think for me, it's the threshold of how painful is it to make the change versus how painful is it to keep the solution that I have. So I talk about this with clients all the time that are in like personal finance or banking or financial planning or lawyers, because it's actually kind of a pain to switch financial providers. It's kind of a pain to switch banks. Like you have to be angry at your bank to go through the effort of switching banks because especially with bill pay, auto pay, all of that kind of stuff now, getting new debit cards, like, oh my gosh. I just think about the 3-month long hassle when you change your name times a bajillion. And now banks are offering transfer services so that you don't have to do it all because that's the way that they can get people to make a shift.
That was the end of that was the cutoff.
Right.
There was too much pain in that process. You're right. You had to be pretty ticked off.
Yeah.
To even want to do that.
And technology is a place where it shouldn't matter. I should be able to set it up with one bank, and then that bank, if they cooperated with each other, should be able to easily transfer it to another. But they don't do that.
No.
And there are rules and privacy and all kinds of things that they lean on for their policies. But the point is that I think that there's a threshold of change. And that's why I think we're coming back to that privilege of if it's working enough for you, then the amount of time and effort you might be willing to put into changing it is fairly low. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that if we're talking about some of the bigger changes, either in our business, if you're talking about shifting the culture, if you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, if you're talking about any of these things, then you have to start getting painful with the change because the status quo isn't good enough, and you have to start feeling other people's pain in those experiences.
And you said something that I thought is something I think everybody needs to ask. How do you even measure pain?
Right.
Like, how do you decide if
and is it pain or is it discomfort?
Right. Yeah. And how good is your denial?
Right.
I have incredible denial in certain areas.
Yeah, me too.
Like I have built up some serious pain tolerance in some zones. And so I have to actually watch the people around me.
Right.
To identify when they start to question things or give me that funny look like, oh, you're doing that again? I'm like, my denial's up again.
And this is why feedback loops with customers and clients are so important.
Yes.
Because they're experiencing things that is easy for you to dismiss. So, the threshold of discomfort that I'm willing to experience standing in line at the grocery store is pretty low. Mm-hmm. I could go to a different grocery store next time without much of a problem. There are several options. Pricing is all basically the same. Yeah. I get the same stuff everywhere. They all carry the same things. Like, there's a couple of differences. I have some favorites, but they're gas stations are the same way, right?
Yeah.
And so the service has to be pretty on point. And the lines have to be pretty short, and because those are the X factors, right?
Yep.
It's not the same thing when I think about going to my favorite sit-down restaurant versus going through a McDonald's drive-through, because my expectations are different. Mm-hmm. But I'm willing to deal with a lot more from a drive-through than I am at my favorite sit-down restaurant.
Isn't it interesting?
I
was just saying that's the human condition.
Yeah.
And most of this, as we're talking about in the book, most of what we're talking about is internal, subconscious
Oh yeah.
Not totally conscious. So you have to look at people's actions. So I bet if we polled the people that were voting for the last mayors, let's say the couple before this even, they would tell you that they're big on innovation, that they move forward. They would probably tell us a lot of those things. And I would tell you their actions tell me that's not quite where they're at, because there have been a variety of people that have run that have been more a new thing. It would have definitely looked different, not better, not worse. I'm just saying there were things and options available that when it came time to take an action, they went, you know what, this is pretty good.
You know what, I'm gonna keep the status quo. I'm pretty good. So
not good, not bad. Just it's an action. It tells us what we're deciding.
So let's think about that a little bit. Let's think about our own proclivity to stay with what we're happy with or happy enough with. Let's think about how we define that for ourselves. And then let's think about the energy and new innovations and new ideas, and say, how can we approach those things with joy and with a yes, instead of a, man, we tried that. So that we can get the best of both worlds between the experience of the past and the new take of the future.
I love it. Thanks for joining us this week on If These Heels Could Talk. We hope you've been pushed a little bit out of your comfort zone. I hope you're looking at a few of your own beliefs on new and old and experience.
And next time you're in a space with 45 pictures of old white guys on the wall, maybe you can ask yourself, maybe I'm willing to step up. Maybe I'm willing to throw my hat in. Maybe somebody I know is willing to throw my hat in. Maybe I'm willing to do that because I want to change the fact that there's all these old white guys on the wall.
Ooh, nice challenge.